Hey, it's me, your friendly cause of depression. I'm sorry. So this video, I want to talk about an update on the premiere date of the final season of Game of Thrones, new footage that HBO released for the final season of Game of Thrones, an update on the spin-off show, and also some fun reveals by George R.R. Martin. Most importantly, and first, in regards to the show, I want to talk about an update on the premiere date for the final season. As we know, HBO's programming president Casey told us weeks back that Game of Thrones Season 8 would premiere in the first half of 2019. In my video where I talked about this, I was fairly confident, due to my great education in a first world country, because that's the only way you would know this, that the first half of the year are the months January through June. While new information makes it appear that we're not getting the favored, by me, premiere date in April. But that doesn't mean Casey was lying about the show premiering in the first half of the year. So how do we know this? First, Joe Bauer, the visual effects supervisor on the show, claimed that the show won't be eligible for the Season 8 VFX work until 2020. This points to most of the 6 episodes not being aired by May 31st, which is the deadline, making an April release for the show impossible. Now, the man did say everything can change on a week-to-week basis, but as of right now, the only thing they have on their plate is Game of Thrones until May. Yes, they've worked on the very last bits of VFX before, just as the season was premiering, but that still means we're more likely to get a May or June premiere. I personally think a May or June premiere date is much better than fall 2019, so I'm okay with this. Which there actually was an update, and a rep for HBO confirmed that Casey was correct, that the air date for the final season would be in the first half of 2019, despite the VFX team going until May. Though there was another update by a source close to the higher-ups at HBO. James Hibbard said, GOT returns for its final 6 episodes that will air during the first half of 2019. There have been reports over the weekend claiming the show's return has been delayed to mid-2019, making it not eligible for Emmys until 2020. Rest assured, first half of 2019 means exactly that, and HBO expects the show will air all its episodes in time for the 2019 Emmy eligibility cutoff. So it's VFX supervisor versus an Entertainment Weekly guy that has ties to the higher-ups that have control over Game of Thrones. Take your pick who you think is right. But how do you feel about this new information? Were you hoping for an April premiere, or do you just not care as long as you get the final season of Game of Thrones in 2019? Interestingly, and I just had to include this, Joe also talked about the final season, saying, I thought it was really brave. I thought it'd be interesting to see. It's very true to what Thrones is, and knowing how it ends, I don't actually see how it could end any other way. I think the whole series has aimed towards this. I obviously can't say what it is. I think there will be divisions because people have grown to identify and like and hate various characters. So everybody has their vision of how they want it to end based on those things, but looking at it objectively, I think the way it ends is the way it must end. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So what do you think on that? Do you think that's just a man kissing the ass of people that pay him really well, or he's telling the truth, that objectively we're all going to be able to step back and go, yeah, Thrones had to end that way. I guess we'll see next year. But still, in the final season of Game of Thrones, HBO released a coming soon video, which included a lot of old footage from season 7 of Game of Thrones, but actually included one new scene from season 8. In this new scene, we see Jon and Sansa are hugging. Sansa looks not very pleased, and can we all sacrifice to the old gods and the new, praying that we don't do that fucking stupid, will Sansa betray Jon? I fucking hate those theories. Just stop. Stop! It seems more likely Jon has returned to Winterfell and has brought Dany with him. Sansa obviously wouldn't trust the sister of the man she believes stole, raped, and killed her aunt, and the daughter of the man that killed her uncle and grandfather. I'd have a hard time trusting Dany too if I was in Sansa's place, but of course Sansa is eventually going to get over it, after she says some really fucking stupid and bitchy things to Dany, of course. In happier news, Jane Goldman's pilot on The Long Night is confirmed to begin shooting in February, which, also to Casey's credit, he said would happen in early 2019. That means we should be getting some juicy new bits of information to hold us over until the final season of Game of Thrones premieres. Lastly, if you didn't attend Worldcon or haven't heard the news from it, where George R.R. Martin talked quite a bit, here's a rundown of the most important things. First, according to attendees, George had a lot of energy and enthusiasm, showing a lot of interest in A Song of Ice and Fire. Which is nice because people keep saying he's lost interest or no longer cares about the world of Ice and Fire. Which, if you stalk the man like I do, I feel like that's pretty obvious, but people like to project their own fears onto that man quite a bit. Anyways, his answers came across as very genuine, and it showed that he still has a passion for this series. What I honestly think was the most important thing George said was him confirming what Bloodraven, a legitimized bastard of King Aegon IV, did with Darksister, one of 2 ancestral Valyrian steel swords of House Targaryen. So George officially confirmed that Bloodraven did in fact bring Darksister to the wall. Now, is it in the Three-Eyed Crow's cave? Maybe, but that's a topic for a different video. He also talked about Bittersteel, another legitimized bastard of Aegon IV, who helped stir up the Blackfire rebellions that saw the realm bleed. When asked if Bittersteel had children, George said, "No, I don't think so." So as of right now, Bittersteel never had children, but keep in mind this could change, just like we're seeing changes to the Targaryen family tree with the new Fire and Blood book coming out this November. I personally love when George was asked about dreams and prophecies, and George went on a roll talking about them. As most of us know, on the topic of dreams and prophecies in the world of Ice and Fire, there are a shit ton of theories. A shit ton, I'm not even exaggerating. It's insane. Even this channel's beautiful and courageous, might I add, moderator has a dream theory coming soon. So George explained that it is fun to have prophecies and dreams, and that he likes them to come true in unexpected ways, which of course we've seen in the books. We've also seen some quotes talking about how prophecies can be a double-edged sword. Still on the topic of prophecies and dreams, he pointed out that in real life, dreams often don't make sense and don't really have a point. So take from that what you will. Thankfully, George also said that while he has been tempted to have a book where all the dreams don't mean anything, so people will pore over them in torment looking for meaning, he hasn't given into that temptation yet. So keep going with your crazy dream and prophecy theories. I personally love them, so you're super impressive to me. For book fans that are still worried that the show is going to ruin the books for them, which I always thought was a really weird opinion to have, but you know, you do you. George again commented that characters that are dead in the show will never die in the books. He stated a lot of people are being killed in the show compared to the book, which I think is odd. Maybe George is getting soft in his old age. I mean, remember when I talked about this statement from George a while back? It's okay if you don't. I don't take it personally. Even though this quote is a bit outdated because some of this has changed in the show, it is still a really good point. Don't assume a character's fate in the show is the same as the books. I kind of get a sense of irritation from him when he says, hey, don't look at Game of Thrones as a draft for my future work, because it's kind of silly to do that. It's also kind of silly when people say, well, I don't need your books anymore because with the final season of Game of Thrones, I know the ending. It's like, okay, I know the fate of Han Solo. I still love when they release new shit, new books, new comics about before his death. It doesn't matter that I know how his story ends. Reading about his story is what's fun. But again, maybe that isn't fun to you, and that's perfectly fine. But, you know, don't tell everyone else that the books are now spoiled for us, because they're absolutely not. Oh hey, and for those of you being a pussy because George is releasing a book this year that you claim you don't want, so therefore no one else in the world wants because obviously you're the center of the universe, George also explained why he's releasing the epic Targaryen history book, Fire and Blood, this year. Besides the obvious reason of he can do whatever the fuck he wants. George explained that the upcoming Game of Thrones successor shows actually draw from this information. In fact, some of the Game of Thrones successor shows are based on the Fire and Blood material, which you can see why he'd want to get that info out. Because rumors have stated that writers for successor shows were filling in their own history. With George having his version out sooner rather than later, he can hopefully nudge them to use his version, not their own. That makes sense. Interestingly, on this successor shows, George said he pitched 3 A Song of Ice and Fire successor shows beyond the 5 we know of to HBO, but none of them are in development. I really want to know what George thinks is worthy of a spin-off show in the world of Ice and Fire. I can think of at least 100 things, but hearing George's opinion on it would be amazing. But let's talk about Winds of Winter again, a book that caused a disturbing amount of people to give death threats to an elderly man. George also spoke about timing and how the show surpassed his books. He revealed that HBO made decisions that caused Game of Thrones to catch up more quickly with the books. They, as we noticed as the seasons went on, cut quite a bit of material, and the showrunners D&D decided 8 seasons was enough. Which I always find fascinating because HBO execs wanted D&D to keep going with more seasons, but they turned down extra money because they felt 8 seasons was enough. Do I agree with D&D? No. Do I understand why they did it? Sure. Anyways, if they wouldn't have cut out all the extra content, George believes he would have had another 2 years to get the Winds of Winter out ahead of the ending of the show. But, and I say this with a lot of love and respect for the man, George doesn't do well with deadlines and timelines. So even if the show went on for a few more seasons, maybe he wouldn't have finished Winds of Winter before. Let's end on some interesting tidbits. George says the Long Night Show is set further in the past than any other show, which absolutely makes sense. He refused to answer if the Red Comet will come back in the books and if there's a missing Clegane sister. Which usually means there's something to those things in future books, though maybe he just doesn't know yet and realize giving certain answers before he knows is a really bad thing. Lastly, George revealed that Davos Seaworth was created in part because he wanted to tell Stannis' story, but didn't want a point of view from Stannis himself. Alright, so I'm done talking about George at Worldcon. I'm glad that he realizes the people that give him death threats and tell him to go fucking, kill himself are the minority of his fans, and the majority of us respect him as a human being, and I'm glad to see he's still so passionate about this world. Let me know your thoughts on the premiere date of the final season in the comment section down below, though. I'm so fucking excited. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and come back for more videos.